What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, while I can't necessarily release the Secret Empire videos until Friday just because of the fact that we have to maintain our schedule, it does not keep me from recording them a week ahead. Because man, do I love this story. It's the only way I know how to work out my excitement for Secret Empire. But in the last videos, what we've talked about so far, because we're approaching the end, like we've got maybe 3 more videos left and then Secret Empire is done, which I'm going to be so disappointed in because this story is so good. But what we've talked about so far is that Secret Empire, for the most part, has basically played out in 3 phases. So the first phase dealt with the idea of Hydra Captain America basically using Civil War II as a way to implement his own rule, in the sense that the superhero community basically waged war against one another, in the sense that you had an Inhuman named Ulysses who could see the future. Because of the fact that he could see the future, the superhero community split in half. Now, over the course of Civil War II, there were times where his visions were a little off. They weren't 100% true, but for the most part, they seemed to be. Now, as a result of these visions, Bruce Banner, the Incredible Hulk, was killed. Different events took place that ultimately led to this fractured superhero community. In light of that, Captain America, as a Hydra agent, began doing things like implementing the erection of a shield around the planet that would basically stave off attacks from all but the most powerful beings in existence. And so because of this set the stage for him to basically conquer the entirety of the United States with the intention of turning his sights onto the rest of the world and then eventually the universe itself. Now, the way in which he was going to conquer the universe came by way of the Cosmic Cube. The problem with this was that the Cosmic Cube had become sentient in the form of a girl named Kavik. And the idea was that after being taken by the Red Skull and indoctrinated by Hydra's ideologies, Kavik, at the request of Red Skull, had basically changed the history of Captain America Steve Rogers, making him a Hydra agent in the first place. The result of this was that one of Captain America's agents, really a guy named Eric Selvig, who was kind of the scientist working behind the scenes to help Captain America, basically fractured the Cosmic Cube. And so what this did is it sent the remainder of the superhero community on a mission to try to capture what shards were left of the Cosmic Cube, while Captain America tried to do the same thing. The problem with this was that Captain America was a lot more influential just because of the fact that he was using fear and using the threat of death in order to get people to hand over their shards of the Cosmic Cube, whereas the Avengers were relying on diplomacy. The result was that we basically get up to this moment right now where what's left of the superhero community is coming together under the leadership of Captain America Sam Wilson. Now, the other half of this is that it deals with the city of New York. Now, the city of New York had basically experienced being thrown into a place called the Dark Dimension, or the Dimension of Darkness, or whatever you want to call it, and it was done by a guy by the name of Blackout, who quite literally was able to just kind of enshroud the entire city of New York. Now, within New York, you also had like Kingpin, you had Daredevil, but really the only true means for their escape would come by way of Doctor Strange, who would attempt to use his magic in order to help them achieve this goal. The problem with this was that it wasn't something easily done. Instead, it was basically Doctor Strange using whatever magics he could to no avail. And so the idea here is that under the speech basically of Sam Wilson, who had vacated his role as Captain America following Steve Rogers basically taking over the United States and then essentially coming back, the world superheroes basically have a rallying point. And that's the coolest thing about this, is because as Captain America was always a rallying point. It was always designed to be that way. And so because of this, dealing with what's left of the superhero community and Sam Wilson racing off as best he can to try to help, quell this threat, the various superheroes facing off against the Hydra agents in an attempt to take their country back, so to speak, what this does is it basically leads into everything that's been going on with Carol Danvers as well as the entire Alpha Flight station. Now, the cool thing about this is that, again, this bounces around from location to location. But with Doctor Strange, remember, he's been going to all these different beings that in some form or fashion tie into magics and mysticism. It's one of the other reasons why New York being whisked away, with Dark Force energy really helped Nick Spencer kind of give himself a way out of the story in terms of Doctor Strange himself, or at least offer the possibility. Because remember, just because of the fact that they're in a different dimension doesn't mean that Doctor Strange is any less powerful than he was before. The issue is, can they escape? And that's the nature of it. Doctor Strange going around grabbing every single spell that he can muster is an attempt to basically escape this realm. But he's got his books, he's got all these different things, but he just can't pull it off because in truth, the Dark Force energy is just far too extreme and he's just not powerful enough to do it on his own. Now remember, a lot of this also comes out of the Jason Aaron Doctor Strange solo series, which is to say, during that story, we dealt with with the idea that all magic in existence was basically being destroyed. And that's why all this works. It's not as though Nick Spencer came along and said, we're going to depower Doctor Strange strictly for this story. Instead, it tied directly into his own story itself in terms of what was going on with his character. With magic basically being obliterated, the source of Doctor Strange's power began to go away. Now, as the enemies, I can't remember what their names were, but as those enemies who were destroying magic were basically defeated and magic began to grow, it was like a tree, right? Like if you go out into a field and you plant the seedling, hoping it'll grow into a tree, and you provide some water and you allow sunlight to hit it, you're not going to come out the next morning with a full-blown redwood tree. You're going to have to wait years, decades, in order for it to grow to its full potential. Now, in the case of magic, it wouldn't take hundreds of years for it to all return, but it does take time. And that's the reason why Doctor Strange is not as powerful as he was before, because the source, the energy he uses, or the magic he uses, is not where it used to be. And so that's really the nature of his character, the evolution of Doctor Strange in terms of what it is that he can and can't do. The problem with this is that while they're trying to cast these spells, try as they might, they cannot get out. They cannot get away. And so that's the craziest thing about this. At the same time, we also have the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now remember, with Alpha Flight, with the forces of Carol Danvers and Hyperion, and all these beings who could easily bring Hydra crashing down to the ground, they're all stranded outside the Earth, and they're totally incapable of penetrating the shield. Now the attempt to get past it comes by way of Rocket Raccoon. And it's really cool because Rocket Raccoon literally shows up and says, hey, there's this massive bomb that we have that we literally stole from another race. We're hoping that we can basically put this bomb inside of the Alpha Flight station and then crash it into the shield, hoping to blow it up. In the end, none of it works. The shield is just as impervious as it ever was. And that's kind of crazy because while all this is going on, there's things like Doctor Strange cannot get them out of the Dark Force dimension. Captain America, Sam Wilson, in his efforts to basically take out the shield agents, is basically knocked down into the ocean and is presumed to be dead. It's almost like this glimpse of success popped up for the Earth superheroes. And almost when they thought they had a chance to win, they didn't. But their one hope comes in the form of Quasar. If you're not familiar with the Quasar character, it's easily somebody to write off. And that's usually one of the things you hear. People who don't know about Quasar, people who just kind of read articles or whatever, are like, whatever, it's Quasar, Quasar's stupid. It's actually not true. In Fantastic Four Volume 1, issue number 552, Quasar fought Galactus to a standstill. Like Galactus was just literally trying to kill the Fantastic Four. Quasar jumped in and was blocking every single attack that Galactus threw out, which I think Galactus was in a hungered state, which is when he's as ravenous and more dangerous than he normally is. So in his worst form, Quasar held off against Galactus. And that's one of the things about the character. It's one of the reasons why Quasar is usually just kind of looked over and just kind of ignored, when in reality, Quasar is insanely powerful. Now, one other thing to keep in mind is that Quasar was Wendell Vaughn. This is a new Quasar, but the power is still the exact same. It's a matter of how you use it. They're given these quantum bands, which allows them to tap into an infinite source of energy, and then in turn, use those bands however they want to. The question is, how far will their imagination take them? In this instance, with Quasar coming back, it's almost like Galactus showing up and just ending everything. Quasar blasts the shield with enough energy to totally destroy it. This is universal level power. And so that's why it's so cool, is because again, this is not Nick Spencer just beefing up the powers of a character and saying, oh man, I need a way out. We're going to amp up the powers of Quasar. We're going to make Quasar more powerful than they've ever been just for the sake of achieving this goal. That power has always been there. Quasar's always been that powerful. It's just, how is that power written by any particular writer? And so again, with this scenario, with the shield being totally and completely obliterated by Quasar, what it does is it leaves the landscape open for those members of Alpha Flight to come flying back down to Earth, which means the Ultimates, Blue Marvel, one of the most powerful beings in existence, Spectrum, who can basically become any form of energy, Hyperion, all these characters just come flooding back into Earth, and now the landscape is effectively even. The stage is set for the fall of Hydra. And so what happens is we end up picking up with Maria Hill. Now remember, if you haven't been keeping up with Secret Empire, Maria Hill was very Nick Fury-esque in the sense of how her character played out. If you're familiar with Marvel, bear with me for a second. Classic Nick Fury, which is to say the white guy Nick Fury, that version of his character always had safeguards, always had bunkers. He always had these situations in place so that if everything went to pot, there was some place he could retreat to and then try to defeat whatever that enemy was. But the fact remains that in this instance, Maria Hill, following the rise of Captain America Steve Rogers, was conquering the entirety of the United States, went underground. And what she did is she became an information broker for the various renegade superheroes out there who were trying to find ways to topple Captain America, the Hydra agent. All she did was slip them information, whatever information she could get. Now, of course, that information came from various sources she had who had been captured by Hydra, in the sense that they were former SHIELD agents, former superheroes. They would pass information on to her for the greater good, which in turn she would pass on to Iron Man and his forces. Now, what this does is it brings the role of Maria Hill into sharp relief, in the sense that she basically finds Blackout. Now, of course, Blackout, being the person that basically grabbed New York and threw it in the Dark Force energy, is the only guy who can basically bring it out. The problem with this is that his allegiances are still a little off. The idea is that with him working alongside Captain America, he didn't know where this would lead to. And so the result is that once Captain America used the powers of Blackout and then took over the country, Blackout had regrets. Blackout wasn't sure that he had done the right thing. But the problem is that Blackout was never an A-list villain. He was never Kingpin. He was never Dr. Octopus. He was never, any of these characters who's just like, I know what I stand for. I know exactly what I believe. He was a guy that at the first sign of danger would run for the hills. And so it was easier for him to basically pretend to continue being an ally of Hydra. And so in the face of all this, Maria Hill does the only thing she can do. She shoots him in the back of the head and kills him. And in doing so, the spell is broken. New York is free out to the world, which in turn brings all of New York's superheroes into the fray. It starts bringing in Doctor Strange, Iron Fist, Power Man, Cloak and Dagger. All these superheroes, no matter how popular, no matter how minor, are all now returning. And so again, this basically continues to set the stage for the defeat of Hydra. And so what happens here is that in this moment, we also, remember, have to deal with the Chitauri. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, who haven't been keeping up, that was the way in which Hydra Captain America constantly kept Alpha Flight on edge. It was one thing for them to be stuck outside the planet Earth because of the huge shield. But what Hydra Captain America had done is he has also gone to this Chitauri race, stolen one of their queens, and brought them back to Earth. And then for that reason, the Chitauri were constantly trying to invade the Earth, crashing themselves on the shield. And Alpha Flight was constantly trying to stop the Chitauri army. The result is that the Chitauri were basically continuing to go against Alpha Flight. It was battling 24 hours a day, day after day, and they would just send wave after wave after wave after wave, which would increase in number with each wave. And so again, it was just hordes just bombarding on Earth. Now, one could ask the question, why didn't Alpha Flight just stand out of the way and just let the Chitauri just keep invading Earth, just keep smashing into the shield? Well, the issue with that is they didn't know how well the shield would sustain. They're protectors of Earth. Despite the fact that they're cast out from the planet, they exist to keep it safe. At the same time, it was also a way to draw a little bit of tension in the story. It was a way for Nick Spencer to just say, oh man, look at how exhausted they are. Look at how worn out they are, that kind of thing. Now, with the Earth superheroes basically returning, with Black Panther in Wakanda, for example, having been captured, for the most part, everybody else staves off as best they can. They defeat every single one of these Hydra agents, or at least attempt to, as best they can. And so what this does is it's leading into a crescendo. It's leading into this final moment, this final push, when everything that Hydra built is going to come crashing down. But the question also has to be asked, what about classic Captain America? One of the biggest questions that I've been seeing down in the comment section is, what is this vanishing point? Again, for those of you guys who are not keeping up with Secret Empire, what we've gotten at least we got it at the end of like the second or third issue, and then we've gotten it interspersed in the different stories so far, is some place that we only know as the vanishing point. And within this vanishing point is classic Captain America, which is to say Steve Rogers before he was revealed to be a Hydra agent. Classic Steve Rogers, so the good guy. The issue is we didn't know what this was. We had no clue what this place was. All we knew is that this was a guy just wandering around, but we had no clue what in the world was going on. He's had little glimpses where he's basically recalled his own history, his origin story, being a byproduct of the super soldier program, fighting against the Nazis during World War II, Bucky Barnes dying against the drone plane, all these different things, this intact history that we know so well. All of this is basically coming out of this vanishing point. And so in this moment, when he sees what seems to be Sharon Carter, this sort of ghostly apparition, when he calls out to her, when she basically vanishes, what we're told is that everyone's gone. Everybody that Steve Rogers had met up to this point in the vanishing point is gone. They're not there anymore. And the reason why is because this vanishing point basically seems to be the cosmic cube, that this vanishing point is Kabik herself, that she's the one that made all this stuff the way it is, which begs the question, how does this reconcile these two Captain Americas? How does it reconcile the Hydra Captain America in the real world and this classic Captain America in this vanishing point, presumably inside the cosmic cube? And I can tell you right now, the next video that we do, will answer that. Man, it'll answer all your burning questions. It will, it's pretty awesome. It's pretty exciting. Man, because like after the next issue, I looked at that and I was like, well, I know exactly how this story is going to end. And it's going to be amazing. With that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and bring this video to an end. I think what we're going to do next week is we are going to cover the Secret Empire, the main story on Friday, or next week what we might do is start to intersperse some of the tie-ins. Because one of the questions people have been asking me is why haven't I covered like the Invincible Iron Man tie-in? Why haven't I covered like the Mighty Thor tie-in or any of those? Those are being done as story arcs. And literally those story arcs end after this issue. And so my idea was I'll wait till those story arcs finish and then start covering them between this issue and the next one. That way we can basically get the full Secret Empire experience, especially when it comes to Amazing Spider-Man, because if you've only been reading Secret Empire, Spider-Man shows up in the next issue and there's no explanation about where he's been. Anyway, guys, we're gonna go ahead and bring this video to an end and I will catch you all later. Peace.